Hello, welcome back to Plant Revelations, and today I'm going to do a video on cuttings in October. This is one of my favourite techniques to propagate semi-evergreen or evergreen Mediterranean type shrubs and some temperate shrubs as well. I found it almost 100% success rate in things like Penstemon, lavenders, different herbs, and some more exotic bits and bobs which I'm going to show you in the video today. So this could be a really good technique for you too, so you can fill your borders with lots of plants for free. The first plant we're going to attempt to take a cutting of is this one. It's Melianthus major. It's got beautiful big blue silvery leaves, hardy to about -12 to -15, and normally after that it'll get knocked down to the ground and then just reshoot up. But if we get a mild winter, these stems will overwinter and have these spectacular red flowers on. But I like to grow it for this beautiful silvery blue foliage. It was growing out all over the path. I've recently just hacked that off, and that's going to be our cutting material. So this is Iochroma australis. This is another subject I'm going to propagate today. Now the technique I'm going to use with this one, you could use for fuchsia, phylogis, Abutilon, Penstemon. So don't be put off by the fact you don't know what plant this is, but I will try and overlay a picture of this. It's rather stunning, purple bell-like flowers. Flowers sort of, I would say, early to mid-summer. And I first grew it many years ago and lost it. It's only hardy to about -10, which is another reason I want to propagate it. So I've got some reserves. And I saw it again at Venter Botanic Gardens, and if you've seen that tour of the garden, which I did, it's worth checking out. And that inspired me to get another one and give it a go again. So the next plant I'd like to propagate is this one. It's called Anisodontea del Rea. It's not looking like much now, but when it's in the ground and it hasn't dried out like this one has, it will flower all summer. It has lovely sort of reddy pink, mallow-like flowers. It's almost like a miniature Lavateria, if you like the hardy Lavateria. In the ground, it flowers virtually all year round. Might have a slight break when it gets super cold. Short-lived, so lasts 5 to 10 years, and then you want to sort of replace it. I put it in this pot because I thought it might be a good bedding plant, and it did flower quite well in the summer, but they much prefer to be in the ground, and I would like a lot more of them. So I'm going to take some cuttings, and it's important not to take cuttings with flower buds on or seed heads on, if you can. As you can see, there's not many without it on here. It's also important not to take cuttings from the top, because these are high in nitrogen, likely to have lots of leafy growth, but not much root. And it's important not to take cuttings from low on your shrubby plant, because they're going to be high in carbon. They'll produce plenty of roots, but not much upper growth. So ideally, I mean, this isn't a very big shrub to choose from, but ideally you'd go for something like this, which has got no flowers on it. It's sort of halfway up. You should have a nice balance of nitrogen to carbon in the cutting, and you should get decent foliage growth as well as root growth. And just when we are taking cuttings, we always make sure we take a bit more than we need, because we've got to cut them down further when we're preparing them.
First of all, make sure you're wearing some gloves. Some of the plants you're dealing with might have irritant sap, and of course it can give you blisters and all sorts. So it's always best to wear your gloves when doing cuttings of plants. Next you'll need a nice sharp pair of secateurs or a cutting knife. I tend not to use the cutting knives because I do find they can crush the stem a bit. I do think a pair of sharp secateurs, give them a wipe down with a bit of alcohol to take any germs or fungicides, so it's nice and aseptic, and then you're ready to make a start. So let's have a look at these Melianthus major cuttings to start with. Now these were the ones overhanging the path. Hopefully that'll focus for you. Now what I find with a cutting is you want at least 4 nodes. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and you cut just below a node. Now with these, with these Melianthus major, they can rot off, so you're almost cutting through the node, so you haven't got a hollow stem. I don't know if you can see that. So we just cut through the node, so we haven't got a hollow stem, and then we want to remove these leaves, because too many leaves will basically cause the plant to lose more moisture. We want this plant to conserve moisture. So we take off the leaves, and then even with these last two leaves, I would probably reduce that to about half. We've got a new leaf coming, and this leaf which has been reduced, we've chopped just below a node. A node is where a leaf comes from. And I'm going to push that cutting into a pot. So now the cuttings are done. We've got about 5 or 6 cuttings. We've got to decide what size pot they're going to go into. Now that is dictated purely by the size of the cutting. So we're going to have to go for something quite big. This is a 2 litre deep. And we want these cuttings to be pushed right down to that first leaf we've left on, like so. And we're going to use a nice free draining mix. So this is 1 part perlite to about 2 to 3 parts compost. So about a quarter to a third perlite to compost. And what that's going to do is give you lots and lots of drainage, which is what we want. We do not want these to rot. They're Mediterranean type plants. They're from South Africa. They're used to very free draining soil. And then what you want to do is just push in your cuttings. Ideally make sure there's none of that leftover leaf there, because that can cause rot. You push your cuttings right in, so they're not touching. We go around the outside of the pot first. And we do that because that is the warmest and most free draining part of the pot. So the cuttings are less likely to rot. And then if you run out of space, you can always pop one in the center. So the idea is they're not touching. And it doesn't matter too much if the leaves are touching, but we certainly do not want the stems touching. So much like with apples, there we go, we push them right down. So most of the stem is underneath. So much like with apples, if they're touching, one bad apple can ruin the lot. But if they're spread apart and one dies and you don't notice, I'm just going to take a bit more off these leaves. Then the rot shouldn't spread. And then when you notice it, you can just pluck out the brown one. So I'm going to give these a water now. I've firmed them down. They're going to go in a cold greenhouse in the shade, or maybe even under a potting bench. And I'm literally just going to forget about them. They don't need a plastic top because they've got these lovely bluey silvery leaves. They're quite able to hold on to moisture, and we're going to a nice cool season. So that's the Melianthus major. Next up, we've got the Iochroma. Now you can just use the same principle for this for something like an Abutilon, because I know not everyone's got Iochroma at home. We've not got much cutting material. So the nodes on these are very close together. So I'm going to do a lot more than 4 nodes. I'm going to make sure my cutting is at least sort of 3 or 4 inches long. So again, same sort of principle, just below a node. I can just pull the leaves off these. I don't need to snip them off. It's normally better to snip them off so you don't tear, but I can get away with that. I can literally take off all the leaves other than a couple. And that's it. And because I'm really low on this, in terms of cutting material, I can even do it with the bit below. This does sometimes work, sometimes it doesn't. And hopefully I can get this filled up now. So it's a similar process with these Anisodontea. We're going for 1, 2, 3, ideally 4 nodes. These are quite long actually. They're not all like that. And then we're pushing it right in. A lot of these are a lot shorter. As you can see, I'm having to use some of the older woodier stems because again, I am a bit low on cutting material. So sometimes you have to use a stem with, sometimes you have to go a bit shorter than you want. Sometimes you have to use a stem with a few flower buds on and you have to take the flower buds off. But these are quite easy to propagate, so I'm not too worried. I've left a few more leaves on these. As you can see, they're much smaller leaves. That's already cut the lower node. Got one more here. And just make sure none of them are touching. So like I was saying previously, you can actually do this with fuchsias if you wanted to. Phylogist would be a good one, or Abutilons. You can do cuttings very similar to this one, and of course the herbs as well, and salvias. And I will just show you quickly how I do the salvias and herbs. It's super easy. When we're doing cuttings of rosemary, lavender, in this case hyssop, woody herbs, this time of year you don't want the green, these lovely green shoots. That would be ideal to do in spring or summer with a plastic bag over the top. But we want something that's not going to wilt, a lot tougher, less likely to rot, or at least not rot very quickly. We're going to use a nice woody stem. So I don't know if you can see that at all. Hopefully it's focusing. What we're going to do is chop below. We're going to have a nice decent sized cutting, chop below a node, pair of leaves, and then we're going to take off the old flower heads, which is exactly the same principle with something like a rosemary, and then we're going to strip it off like that. So all you've got is just a little tuft, maybe 2 or 3 sets of leaves and a woody stem, and that's going to go straight into the compost, nice and deep. In fact, I might make it a touch smaller. I'm going to push that right down to the first set of leaves. Hopefully you can see this a bit better. It's really, really easy. You can be quite rough with them. I'll just chop a bit off the top there. Stick that in. Got another one here, look. They're not pulling off easy, just snip them off. I'm just going to shove that one in like that. If you haven't got a cold greenhouse, these could just go in like under a carport, or they could go into a conservatory. Or if you've got a very cool, unheated room in the house, you don't want them to be too warm. That will probably push them into growth, and you'll just end up with horrible leggy cuttings that probably haven't got much root. So you do want them to slow down. Like I say, the benefit of this is that you just have to check in on them probably once a month just to water them once the temperatures have cooled down. And of course you get lots of plants for free. You could easily, from 2 or 3 lavenders, doing this method, but I've got nothing left there, you could easily, from 2 or 3 lavenders, from this method, create a whole lavender hedge. Another one you can do are shrubby salvias, and again you can treat them a real similar way that I've done the lavenders. I'm just chopping the top off because the tip was dead because it was an old flowering stem. Do them again about 3 or 4 inches long, just below a node. And then you simply pull those lower leaves off. And then you can stick that in to a pot. I'm just going to shove it in with these Anisodontea, just like that, and they'll root very easily. And in fact, I did this in August, and you see I've got a whole pot of salvia cuttings there. So these are like the shrubby salvias, like your hot lips. This one is, I think this one's neon, which is a bright pink one, but you could do it with nectarlinda, any of those. And very quickly this has started to grow. I don't expect the one I've just done to grow really until spring, but yeah, you can also use this method in sort of August time, early September, and very quickly they will root. But I wouldn't, even though they've rooted and there's roots coming out the bottom, I won't put these on till the spring. And here we can see you've got 4 pots of cuttings. Most of them should take. Normally this method works quite well, you get a lot less losses. But even if a half or a quarter of them take, you're still going to have a lot more plants which you can help fill out your borders next year, and it will save you a load of money. So I'm going to water these now, put these in a cold greenhouse, or certainly a spot that's out the wind, out the sun, so they don't dry out too quickly. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you found this interesting and helpful, and let me know how you get on with yours. Ciao, ciao for now.